The rules of this video are that everything that happened in the anime has happened the same to us. We aren't taking how I beat L in the previous video over to this video.
Mr. Yagami, who are you? One of the kidnappers?
After a couple years after defeating L, I took his place and am now at the head of the task force. Nobody suspects me of being cured, but everything is about to get interesting again. The task force and I have found out that the director of the police has been abducted. The kidnappers want to exchange the director for the Death Note. My first question is, how do they know about the Death Note? The only people who know about the Death Note are the task force and L before he died. So either one of the task force members leaked information or L told someone else before he died. I would assume the latter of the two. The only place I know that L was connected to was Wami's house, the FBI, and the police. What's left of the police are working with me on the task force, so they know what I know. The FBI no longer wanted to take part in the Kira case after the 12 FBI agents were killed. So the only conclusion would be that it's someone from Wami's house. I would have some of the task force members try to investigate Wami's house for a possible suspect as to who could have kidnapped the director. We might be able to learn about L's successors Mello and Nira as well as their names and faces. As well as this, I would have a fake Death Note made just in case I can use it against the kidnappers. The director might also accidentally give information that I wouldn't want him telling anyone, so I would have to kill him to be safe. But I don't want anyone to suspect that Kira might be linked to the director, so I would do this. I'd write the director's name in the Death Note that he'd be murdered by one of the kidnappers. I'd write that once the kidnappers come to get him, the director attacks them while searching for a phone. If possible, he would take pictures of the kidnappers' faces or his location and send them to my father's cell phone. In the process of this, the kidnappers would kill him. If the director was able to get any pictures of the kidnappers' faces, I could use them to find where they are. But if the director isn't able to send any pictures, it looks like the kidnappers killed him and not Kira. After this, I would tell the rest of the task force to be careful of themselves and their families, as the kidnappers might come after us next. The kidnappers have had to been watching us to know how to kidnap the director without us knowing sooner. During this time, we would learn about the SBK and Nir. We wouldn't have to worry too much about them. At least not yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Boss!
Shut up. Can't you see that I'm busy?
I'm sorry, but Eddie and I were talking for a minute, and it looks like Takemura hung himself with his tie somehow.
After the director's death, the Mafia would try to kidnap Seiyu Yagami. Because I mentioned to have our families under protection, it would be harder for the Mafia to get Seiyu, and if they did, we'd be able to track them back to where they're hiding. But somehow the Mafia managed to get to Seiyu first. They call my father and tell him they kidnapped his daughter in exchange for the notebook. If I wanted to, I could have my sister killed in a similar fashion to the director. This way it wouldn't look suspicious that Kira is connected to the Japanese police. However, I'm more hesitant to kill my sister than I was with the director. The Mafia gives us directions as for when and where we will make the exchange and tell us to meet them in 2 days. I would also make some demands or suggestions as to how we meet and make the exchange. I would suggest that the Chief Yagami only meet with one member from the kidnappers, 1-to-1. The Mafia would most likely go along with this plan, as it was even part of their original plan in the show. I would start making travel arrangements and check to see if there might be anything the kidnappers could use to prevent us from controlling the situation. As well as this, I would get the fake Death Note I prepared as well as the real one. I would have a small tracking device planted in the back covers of both the fake and real Death Notes. I would take one page from the real Death Note and put it in the pages of the fake Death Note with some glue that can make the page easily removable if I wanted to take the page out. I tell Chief Yagami to keep both Death Notes in a bag. The bag will have a secret compartment for the real Death Note to go into. I tell him to also keep track of where the fake page in the Death Note is, and when he meets with the Mafia member to hold on to the Death Note and not let him take it if they wanted to test it first. If they wanted to test the notebook, I tell Chief Yagami to open the notebook and fold it so that they write on the real Death Note page, and if at any point they're distracted, remove the real page and put it in the bag or his pocket.
I'm going to give the notebook to some criminal in exchange for my daughter's life. When the time comes, it's the right thing to do. As a police officer, as a human being, and as a parent.
Now Chief Yagami is preparing to go meet the kidnappers. But the plan goes on a wrong path as the Mafia has already prepared a flight for the chief to go on. They take him to the middle of the desert and drop him off the plane. He goes into a tunnel and sees Seiyu Yagami inside a clear chamber device. The Mafia member explains that when he puts the death note in one slot and turns the device, he will get the death note and Chief Yagami will get his daughter back. But first the kidnapper wants to test the notebook. Chief Yagami takes out the fake notebook and turns it to the page from the real death note and folds the notebook so that the Mafia member can only write on that page. After writing on the page, the Mafia member waits to see if the death note is real from the other Mafia members. While he's doing this, Chief Yagami looks around, turning his back to the kidnapper in the room with him, and removes the real death note page from the fake death note and then closes the notebook. The Mafia member gets confirmation that the person he wrote down is dead. They now believe that it's the real death note. Chief Yagami makes the trade, giving the Mafia members a fake death note while we get Seiyu back. The fake notebook goes back to the hideout of the Mafia. Nier would tell us who he believes is behind the kidnapping, being Mello.
Mihael Kehl. Your real name, it's Mihael Kehl.
After they get the notebook, we would be able to tell where their location is. We would have to act fast as they would soon realize the death note they got was a fake. As soon as we're prepared, we can ambush their hideout. I would prepare cameras on the task force members' helmets, as well as give the extra cameras to hold on to in their pockets so I can watch the whole thing. Misa would also be watching with me, and since she has the Shinigami eyes, she would be able to see Mello's face and his real name. The task force ambushes the Mafia hideout and corner Mello. Mello asks the task force to remove their cameras and that only Chief Yagami talk to him. Now the Chief and Mello are in the same room together, and the Chief secretly takes one of the extra cameras out. Misa sees Mello's real name and tells me. A Mafia member who was also secretly in the room with Mello shots the Chief. While this happens, the rest of the task force enters and tries to stop Mello. Mello blows up the whole base and escapes. After this, I write Mello's real name in the death note and specify that he commits suicide in such a way that nobody would find his body. And that's how I would beat Mello and the Mafia. But what do you think? Is there a better way to do it? Let me know in the comments.